All right, good afternoon and welcome to EMSSystems Institute's EMT program. We're going to start off with just, cordial welcome to our program. We have several lectures that are given, and each time that a lecture is given, we need to make sure that we are clocked in order to get credit for the video. So follow your procedures and we will make sure that we document your time for watching this video. So chapter 1, EMS operations or EMS systems. Welcome again, like I said, to emergency medicine, and I congratulate each one of you for making a choice to make this a part of your life, because it is a part of life. It is something that I've been doing since 1979, so I really enjoy the heck out of it. All right, so EMS systems. The textbook, it's your primary resource for the EMT course. It discusses what will be expected of you during the course and what other requirements are in there. Students will learn the differences from first aid training, which originally is developed by the Department of Transportation, and also like the first responder or emergency medical responder course. It's called EMR, and the training courses from EMT, AMT, and then all the way up into paramedic. EMS is a system, and Chapter 1 discusses this system in multiple components. EMS system, it consists of a team. It is a team-based approach of healthcare professionals. It provides for pre-hospital or emergency care and transport. So it's care that's outside of the hospital, pre-hospital emergency care, and is governed by state laws. After you successfully complete this course, you should be eligible to take the National Registries of EMT exam or your state certification exam. After you pass the certification exam, you are eligible to apply for state licensure. Licensure is the process by which the state ensures applicants' competency in an examination setting. It allows states to manage who can function as a healthcare provider and who cannot. So, in most states, there are 4 training or licensure levels. In some areas, you have licensure, some areas you have certification. Here in the state of Florida, we are certified, we are not licensed. But there's respectfully 4 different categories in pre-hospital medicine. EMR, which stands for Emergency Medical Responder. EMT, which stands for Emergency Medical Technician. AEMT, which stands for Advanced Emergency Medical Technician. And finally, the highest level is paramedic. The EMT course includes 4 types of learning activities: reading assignments, step-by-step demonstrations to teach your hands-on, summary of skill sheets, and then also case presentation and scenarios. EMT training, focus, and requirements, plain and simple. What are we doing? EMTs are the backbone of the EMS system in the United States. They provide emergency care to the sick and injured. Some patients are in life-threatening situations, while others only require supportive care and transport to the hospital. Licensure requirements. Requirements differ from state to state. Generally, the requirement to be licensed and employed as an EMT are as follows. First off, you got to have a high school diploma or equivalent, proof of the immunization against certain communicable diseases, and successful completion of a background check and drug screening, and a valid driver's license. Also, successful completion of a recognized healthcare provider BLS cardiopulmonary resuscitation course, and successful completion of a state-approved EMT course. Here in the state of Florida, the minimum requirement is 300 hours. The NHTSA, which is the National Highway Transportation Safety Administration, their requirement is a minimum of 150 hours. So it all depends state to state. Every state has the option to increase the requirement for EMT. Also, there needs to be a successful completion of a state-recognized written certification and successful completion of a state-recognized practical certification and demonstration of the mental and physical ability necessary to safely and properly perform all the tasks and functions described in the define the role as an EMT. You also need to be in compliance with other state, local, and employer provisions. Now, Americans with Disability Act, or ADA, it protects people who have a disability from being denied access to programs and services that are provided by state and local governments. It does prohibit employers from failing to provide full and equal employment to the disabled. Personal background in accordance with state and criminal requirements. States have various requirements prohibiting individuals that have committed either misdemeanors and or felonies from becoming EMS providers. So it is possible to become an EMT with certain disabilities. Like if you're confined to a wheelchair, you can become an EMT to become a dispatcher. So it's not going to eliminate you from that process. Let's talk about overview of the EMS system. There'll be 3 of these slides about where do we come from, history of EMS. There is a long tradition of people providing emergency medical care to their fellow human beings. I mean, if you want to take it all the way back to the 1200s, there is evidence, and even further back, battlefield medicine from the Aztec and the Mayans, even surgery being performed, craniectomies being performed by the Aztec and the Mayan physicians from head trauma up until the present today. But let's talk about more modern types of traditional origins of EMS. First, volunteer ambulances in World War I. In World War I, we recognized we need to get people off the battlefield, and we needed to get them to a hospital as soon as possible. And then later, we started actually applying some of the knowledge that we gained in World War I to begin treating patients in World War II. We actually did field care. We came up with a triaging system. We came up with a bandaging system and how to stop bleeding, how to treat for shock, those kind of things that we applied in World War II. And then later, as a field medic, we started doing helicopter evacuations during the Korean conflict. Notice how I'm talking about war. Well, we learned our pre-hospital medicine from war. From the Civil War all the way up to present day. We're still learning and we're still practicing new types of medicine. EMS as we know it today, and the commonality of EMS, in 1966, we had a publication of the following paper that we call the White Paper, The Accidental Death and Disability, the Neglected Disease of Modern Society. A physician wrote this saying that this is ridiculous that our people are dying out in these car accidents. We should be able to help them. So then the DOT in the 70s published the first EMT training curriculum. And then the American Academy of Orthopedic Surgeons prepared and published the first EMT textbook in around 1971. It was the predecessor of the book that you're using today that's written by Nancy Caroline and her crew. National standardization efforts became into place. We wanted to standardize EMS educations. In the late 1970s, DOT, the Department of Transportation, which was a division of the United States government, developed the national standard curriculum for EMTs. During the 1980s, many areas enhanced by the EMT national standard curriculum by adding EMTs with advanced level of training who could provide key components of ALS care and advanced life-saving procedures. This happened in the 80s. So this involved myself when I transferred out of the military into the 80s. We started now doing all this advanced stuff, so it was great. In the 1990s, the NHTSA developed the EMS Agenda for the Future, which is a document with a plan to standardize the levels in EMS education and also the providers. So on a federal level, the National EMS Scope of Practice Model, it provides guidelines for EMS skills. This document provides an overarching of guidelines for minimum skill sets of each EMS provider level that should be accomplished. Then you have the state level as well. The state gets involved, such as the state of Florida. The state of Florida does, through its lawmaking rules, specifically, we have 401, which is our Florida statute. 401 is the nutshell or the backbone of what we call 64J. 64J is the Florida Administration Code. The Florida Administration Code tells us how long we have to go to school, what has to be on ambulances as far as equipment, medications, band-aids, everything, and then also exactly how we retrain ourselves every 2 years in order to be recertified. Then you also have a local level as well. We must have a medical director. You got to have a medical director here that is overseeing. He has to be a licensed physician, and he provides that daily oversight and support to EMS personnel. Some examples of that would be like the medications that will be carried on an ambulance or where the patient is going to be transported to. This is slide 15. Slide 15, this shows you an integration of medical direction, the National EMS Scope of Practice, and also the State EMS Office and how that comes together. Public BLS and immediate aid. Okay, millions of lay people are trained in BLS, or CPR. Okay, CPR and first aid. It is what can happen before we get there. If somebody simply begins doing chest compressions on somebody, it increases their survivability by about 35%. So it's incredible how much public effort's been put into doing education of CPR and first aid. We also increase the availability of public access to what's called an AED. AEDs are automated external defibrillators that the public can use. Thank you to our president, in the past, that he developed this model that he was going to put AEDs out in every single government location in order to provide defibrillation to people that were in cardiac arrest situations. With that, I mean, he implemented the purview of creating early CPR. So with that said, AEDs were put in government buildings, including post offices, including public and museums and those kind of things. So good stuff. EMRs are first responders. Emergency medical responders are generally their first responders, such as law enforcement officers and firefighters. Then you have EMR training. It provides these individuals skills necessary to initiate immediate care and assist EMTs upon their arrival. The course focuses on providing immediate BLS care and urgent care, and with limited equipment. Generally, this particular course is a 1-week course or 40-hour program. Next is EMT. Welcome. EMT courses require, based on the state level, a minimum of 150 hours and even more hours in some states. Case in point, our hours required here are most definitely 300 hours. The EMT possesses the knowledge and skills to provide basic emergency care. On arrival at the scene, the EMT assumes responsibility for the assessment, care, and package and transport of the patient. Then advanced emergency medical technicians, AEMTs. The AEMT course adds the knowledge and skills in specific aspects of advanced life support for those individuals who are trained experienced EMTs. So you need to be an experienced EMT. You go to the advanced level if it's offered within your state, which will allow you to do intravenous therapy, where you're given fluids. You're starting an IV on somebody, you're giving them fluids. You can also do certain advanced airway adjuncts, like some even do intubations, where they stick an endotracheal tube into the esophagus, and some do just King tubes, but there is more advanced airway types of skills that are available. And then administration of a limited number of medications. Finally, paramedics. Paramedics is a very extensive course of training. The course hours range from 1,000 to more than 1,300 hours. Here in the state of Florida, it's 1,150 hours, and it's divided between classroom and internship type of training. It is a 1-year program after you've already been an EMT for a period of time. You truly have to be committed to take this next step, because it's a big responsibility. The course may be offered within the context of an associate's or a bachelor's degree program as well. Training covers a wide range of ALS skills to include endotracheal intubation, emergency pharmacology, cardiac monitoring, and other advanced treatment skills. All right, so the 14 components of the EMS system. For the EMS agenda for the future that we discussed earlier that was written has 14 different components that it outlines. The first one being public access, next one being clinical care, then medical direction, then integration of health services, information system, prevention, EMS research, communication systems, human resources, legislation and regulation, evaluation, system finance, public education, and education systems. This illustration shows the components of NHTSA's emergency medical system, service systems, how the interaction happens. From the initiation of the incident recognition to access to 911, dispatch, first responder gets there, BLS is being provided, or basic life support, then advanced life support, then transport either by ground or air via ambulance, then the emergency department, specialty care, patient rehabilitation, prevention, awareness, and public education. It is a cyclic type of revolvement around emergency medical services that has all of these 14 different components. And it doesn't matter whether it's a trauma patient, a cardiac or stroke patient, a poison, pediatric, or other specialty type of patients, it revolves around these 14 components. So, let's talk about public access and communication systems. Public access and communications, easy access to us. You need to be able to call one phone number and off we go. Whether it's 911 here in the United States, or if you go abroad, a lot of times it's 119 or 114. You just never know. But there is a centered dispatch system that receives a call from a public service access point, 911. It goes to a dispatcher at the communication center. Trained dispatchers obtain that information and dispatch an ambulance crew and other equipment and responders. An emergency medical dispatcher, or EMD system, or dispatcher working in an EMD system, was developed that helps the dispatchers being able to relay information or give instruction to the caller, so maybe a life can be saved before the first responders get there. Also, there's new technology that allows for us to locate, the incident if you're calling from a cell phone, because of the fact that we have the global positioning system that floats around out there in space that is connected to your phone, so we know where you're at. Everybody knows where you're at. Clinical care describes the pieces of equipment and the scope of practice for using the equipment. Obviously, we need to familiarize EMTs with their primary service area, our PSAs and ambulance controls. And during this clinical care portion of it, it is knowing what to do when you get out there into the field. Now, human resources and how that works. Human resources, every department that you may go work for, has people that focuses on the people who deliver emergency care. And the EMS agenda for the future, it encouraged the creation of systems that help protect the well-being of the EMS providers, so the well-being of us. This is a stressful job, folks. Don't let it kid you. There's a lot of action out there, a lot of excitement, but there's a lot of sadness too, and things that you may see that may disturb you, that you may need to talk about to somebody. You can't pent that stuff up, and there's a whole separate lecture that will cover that. Medical direction, we got to have physicians that oversee what we do. The physician or medical director, they authorize the EMT to provide medical care in the field. The medical director is the ongoing working liaison between the medical community, hospitals, and EMTs in the service. Appropriate care is described in what we call as standing orders that the physician cooperates with and writes with the agency that you're working for and approves it. It gives us a scope of practice of what he's allowing us to do on patients in the field on his behalf. Now, medical control can be offline or online. Write this down. You will see this on a test. Offline is indirect. This is your standing orders, your training. This is your protocols, the books that you have to study and memorize. Now, online is pretty simple. It's direct. You pick up the phone or you get on the radio and you're speaking with a physician one-on-one and you're getting your orders from him. So write that down. You will see that on a test. Legislation and regulation, training, protocols, and practices follow legislation. Now remember, I want you to write this down too. You need to know this. You need to read this. You need to go online and find it. Florida Statute 401. Just type it into a Google search and go find it. If you're in another state, do the same thing. Find the legislation that allows you to practice as an EMT or as a paramedic, because you need to know what you're being governed under. To include also the administration code. Here in Florida, it's 64J. So if you're here in Florida watching this, type in 64J Florida Administration Code. Bam! If you want to get really easy, just FLDOH EMS. That's Florida Department of Health EMS. Bam! It'll take you right there. You can see all the licensure requirements, the advisory council meetings that we have once a quarter, and everything you need to know about emergency medicine here in Florida. If you're in another state, do the same thing. It's usually under your Department of Health. That's where your EMS is regulated through. Integration of health services. Pre-hospital care should be a continuance, in the emergency department to ensure the patient receives comprehensive continuity of care. So when you come into the hospital, you're turning that patient over to equal or higher in training in order for you to make that happen so the patient's best treatment can happen. Now, mobile integrated healthcare, this is new and it's an exciting new part of EMS. Mobile integrated healthcare, MIH, is a new method of delivering healthcare services that utilizes the pre-hospital spectrum. Mobile integrated healthcare evolved as a result of the Patient Protection and Affordability Care Act, with the goal to facilitate improved access to healthcare at an affordable price. Folks can't get healthcare. They're coming to the emergency department for boo-boos, for splinters in their fingers. When we as EMTs and paramedics could be out there in some methodology, whether it's in a van, whether it's in a stationary building or whatever, and provide some kind of healthcare to these folks that don't need emergent care. In the mobile integrated healthcare model, healthcare is provided within the community rather than a physician's office or a hospital by an integrated team of healthcare professionals. This new branch of healthcare is causing an evolution of additional training levels for EMS providers and additional jobs. So this is good stuff. One new aspect is community paramedicine, in which experienced paramedics receive advanced training to equip them to provide services within the community. In addition to the patient care services, a paramedic would typically provide services provided under the community paramedics may include performing health evaluations, wellness visits, checks, immunization programs, monitoring chronic illness or conditions, and obtaining laboratory samples, right up to doing assessments with video live feeds with a physician, so the physician's in his or her office overseeing it, receiving the information, and then they can properly prescribe, send out by email, text, send to the Walgreens, everything's all ready to go, and the patient never had to leave the comfort of their own home. Evaluation. The medical director maintains quality control, continuous quality improvement on how we evaluate the system, how we evaluate what's going on in the system. This is through what's called continuous quality improvement. When somebody makes a mistake, it's not the end of the world. It's something we learn from. Trust me, we've been doing EMS for such a long time. Things that we did back in the 70s, we wouldn't even think of doing anymore because they didn't work. That's how we learn, and we did it through what's continuous quality improvement. Information systems, how we get our information. Computers are such a wonderful thing. Nowadays, we're using computers to document patient care. We're carrying Tough books, or we're carrying Chromebooks, or some kind of electronic medium that we can get that information in there. We can take photos, we can make recordings. It's stored electronically, and the outcomes or the information that's stored can be used to improve patient outcomes. System finance systems depend on, how we, this EMS is expensive. It is very expensive. Monitors alone cost thousands, tens of thousands of dollars, $10,000 to $20,000 for one monitor alone. Ambulances, $200,000 to $300,000. Personnel, averages salaries between $20,000, $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 a year, depending on what you're doing. It's expensive, so somebody's got to finance it. This table 1-4 comes off of slide number 37. It talks about different ways that EMS is funded. Through private organization, fire department, third service, and hospital. We find a lot of taxation is what funds, and then also reimbursement. Medicare, Medicaid, insurance, those kind of things. Personnel also may be paid, volunteer, or a mix of the two. EMTs may be asked to gather insurance information from patients. Certain signatures need to be required, HIPAA notifications, those kind of things. We'll talk about that with confidentiality here shortly. And then we need to obtain written permission from patients to bill their health care insurance. Educational systems, EMS instructors. EMS instructors are licensed in most states. Most EMS training programs must adhere to national standards established by 2 accrediting agencies. The Committee on Accreditation of Educational Programs for EMS Professions, COAMPS, and the Commission on Accreditation of Allied Health Educational Programs, CAHEP. ALS training is usually provided in a college, adult career center, or hospital setting, or also provided in private institutions that are accredited. Information and skills in emergency medical care change constantly. Refresher training and continued education is very, very important. So your education does not end here. It continues on and on. Information on skills in emergency medical care change constantly as well, so refresher training is, again, very, very important. We call this continuing education. All right, prevention in public education. Prevention in public education, we need to prevent the injury if possible. It's a big aspect of EMS. Public health examines the health needs of the entire population. EMS work with public health care agencies in order to do primary prevention and secondary. Primary prevention focuses on strategies that will prevent the event from happening, and secondary prevention is after the event's already happened. How can we make things safer so it doesn't happen again? This table on the slide lists examples of public health accomplishments. This is table 1-5 on slide 42. EMS research. Without research, we wouldn't be here today. We need to find out what makes the heart work. We need to find out if the processes and the stuff that we're doing out in the field is working. So research has to be a part of it. Roles and responsibilities. You got to keep your vehicle and your equipment ready. You got to ensure for the safety of yourself and others. Operate your emergency vehicle, safely and in accordance to standards. And be an on-scene leader. You may have to be the leader until somewhere of a higher authority arrives, because you may be the first one. And you need to be able to perform evaluations on scene. You also need to know when you need to call resources when needed, when you can handle what you can handle and when you can't handle something. You need to know that. And how to gain patient access, how to get to them, how to perform a patient assessment, and how to give emergency medical care to the patient while waiting for arrival of additional units. You also need to give patients emotional support. This is a very trying time for patients and also patients' family members. The death of a child is very, very difficult, so you may have to deal with managing the mother or the father's grief in that process. Maintain a continuity of care. You need to do the same kind of care and deliver it to other healthcare professionals in a continuity method. It needs to be the same way every time. Resolve emergency incidents. It gets chaotic out there. Uphold medical and legal standards and ensure to protect patients' privacy. You also need to give administration support. You need to do paperwork. You need to oversee the checkout of your truck and the filling out of paperwork, your truck's in service, all kinds of stuff. And then constantly continue your professional development. You need to grow. You can't just sit as an EMT forever. You need to go out and take another class or two and pick up, maybe you're doing an advanced airway for EMTs or IV therapy for EMTs, if your medical direction allows it. You need to cultivate and sustain community relations and routines. Wherever you're working at, you need to get to know the culture, the people, in your response, section, and then even more, just plainly the city. And then you need to give back to the profession as well by joining organizations and being a part of it. All right, so professional attributes of an EMT. This photograph here is a good model of an EMT. He's definitely has integrity, a look of integrity about him. He looks like he's got some empathetic. You need to be able to put yourself in somebody else's shoes, being aware and thoughtful towards the needs of others. You need to be self-motivated. You need to discover problems and being able to solve them without someone directing you. Your appearance and hygiene, it needs to be good. You need to have a sense of trust, professionalism, knowledge, and compassion. You need to project that sense of trust. If you're dirty and don't look good, and your hair's all disheveled, your pants are your shirt's untucked out of your pants, you're not going to install trust, especially in the elderly people that have very certain values of what people should look at. Self-confidence. You need to know what you know, and knowing what you do not know, and being able to ask for help. Time management. You need to be able to manage your time effectively and know how to delegate multiple tasks to ensure safety and efficiency. Communications. You need to understand others and making yourself understood to others. Teamwork and diplomacy. Being able to work with others, knowing your place with the team. Communicating while giving respect to the listener. Respect. Placing others in high regard or importance. Understanding that others are more important than you. Patient advocacy, constantly keeping the needs of the patient as your center focus of the care. Even if it comes down to putting a blanket on them or putting a pillow under their head or making sure that they got everything that they need, that they're okay. Communication is a key. The biggest complaint that we find from patients that are in hospital is that nobody told them what was going on. Communication, and then careful delivery of care, paying attention to detail, making sure what's being done for the patient and is done as safely and efficiently as possible. Other professional attributes, most patients will treat you with respect, some won't. You got to be patient with these people. If they get angry, let it go off your back, man. It's not that big a deal. Don't take it personally. And also, you need to understand privacy. Got to keep the patient's information private. Finding or disclosures made by the patient should be discussed only with those that are treating the patient, and in limited situations as required by law with police and other social service agencies. Very much so, there's a Healthcare Act. It's called HIPAA. It is the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act. It protects folks' medical information, and it will, give severe penalties if you're in violation of that. All right, so with that, we're going to let you guys go. There is a review at the end of slide 51. Go through and answer these questions, and once you answer those questions, you'll be opening up your Quizlets that's available for you on the Navigate 2 system, and you'll do Quizlet that covers Chapter 1, EMS System. That's Quizlet number 1, Chapter 1, that will cover the EMS systems, and that you will find in Navigate. With that, it's been a pleasure. I hope to see you on the next lecture, and hang in there. You only got 16 weeks. It'll be over before you know it, and we will see you next time. Have a good one.